Hi everyone, my name is David and I'm going to give a presentation called Call After COVID, Asynchronous E-Learning in Higher Education. So just a little bit about me. I am from the UK, but I live and work in Japan as an English instructor at a Japanese university. And my research interests largely revolve around computer-aided language learning, task-based language learning, and so forth. So in this presentation, I'm going to start off with a background of CALL and during the COVID pandemic. I'll talk about CALL, computer-aided language learning, and MALL, mobile-assisted language learning. I'll especially spend time on the strengths of MALL. Then I'll talk about Flipgrid as it encapsulates these strengths before giving my conclusions. So as we all know, there was an abrupt and a seismic educational shift that happened in 2020 because of the pandemic. And students of the world were forced to undertake their studies remotely through the internet. And this really created a severe disruption to the pedagogical status quo as teachers across the globe scrambled to maintain this semblance of normality by offering online lessons. In higher education, some disciplines translated to the new environment a bit more successfully than the others, but more lecture-heavy programs could be provided through recordings, and student questions would be abated by email. So the problem is that for more practical higher educational programs such as EFL courses, this is a bit more problematic because fundamental to language learning is the degree of exposure to the L2 or the non-native language to the learner. And this means that beginning EFL early and learning with high regularity is crucial. Also, repeated L2 exposure is bolstered through the negotiation of meaning, which Long talks about. Students need to create output to efficiently retain knowledge to learn effectively. And this is especially important with regards to speaking. And with COVID-19 related classroom restrictions, a lack of in-person tuition, a student's ability to create verbal output is limited. So some teachers were quick to jump to synchronous platforms such as Zoom, which are these platforms that promise real-time online classrooms, but they also were plagued with a combination of hardware issues, increased fatigue or anxiety from teachers and students, and it really made the learning environment not so great for learning languages. So at the time of recording, although the possibility of COVID-19 abating is not quite clear, students are gradually returning to traditional face-to-face classrooms, and it's possible and probable that the prominence of these e-learning platforms in their current state is going to wane. But I think, and I argue, that neglecting the potential of these asynchronous platforms is a mistake, and that I'm going to argue that they can be quite easily integrated into the traditional classroom as regular homework exercises using smartphones as a part of a blended learning course. Next, I'm going to give a brief background of the EFL e-learning space. So the overarching area guiding L2 e-learning research is computer-aided language learning, or CALL. And it can simply be described as the use of a computer in the teaching or learning of a second or foreign language. So the multimodal nature of CALL perhaps explains the recent surge of interest, something of a symptomatic shift displaying the growing salience of non-linguistic forms of communication, which can include significant learning advantages, which I'll cover a little later. However, I think blindly mandating CALL initiatives in the face of crises such as COVID will be fruitless endeavours unless teachers and students are willing to adopt the technology as part of their teaching and learning. I think this is illustrated through Prensky's 2001 widely cited Digital Natives and Digital Immigrants paper, which highlighted that learners who've grown up with technology, i.e. digital natives, think and process information fundamentally differently compared to the majority of their teachers, who are the digital immigrants. And these are teachers without this digital upbringing and with it a reluctance to use it in the classroom, resulting in a bit of a divide between teacher and student. Although while the age of Prensky's paper belies the fact that many digital native learners have become digital native teachers themselves, simply adopting technology without being aware of current trends might be an insufficient bridge to effective core practice. In other cases, teachers may lament the inability to directly control student learning through a digital medium, which misaligns their ideals with student-centeredness. For example, when tasked to decide on using a tablet, or I think it was an iPad, to use in a university context, one study highlighted that teachers preferred larger devices as they matched the size of A4 paper. Students, in contrast, gave preference to the smaller tablet as they were more portable. So ultimately, teachers not only need to adapt to the digital needs of their students continually, but they also need to give more attention to the devices that students use. In more recent years, attention is being paid to these portable devices due to their increasingly versatile nature. Part of this is owed to Web 2.0, an evolution of the internet seen in the mid-2000s that, according to Franklin and Van Harmelen, saw an increase in internet speeds, user-generated content and participation, mobile communication usage, always-on computing, and the rise of social media platforms. This was assisted by lower barriers of entry, such as technical prowess compared to computers, which allowed for mass adoption. For language learning, the transition to Web 2.0 prompted the emergence of a subgenre of CALL, mobile-assisted language learning, or MALL. MALL distinguishes itself by removing the constraints set by CALL to freely allow learning to occur at any time or place. This liberation also allows for student-centered learning that creates better contextualization and encourages authentic language use. One can imagine, for example, an EFL lesson where a teacher provides students with GPS coordinates to a location to record a video and annotate what they see by using their smartphones. This unobstructed facilitation of the environment as an embedded system is one of the goals of MALL, to be part of a constant and seamless lifestyle, operating more and more in the background invisibly and automatically. While few can dispute the versatility of the smartphone for learning, the small physical dimensions of the screen and a reliance on touch-based inputs can inhibit the creation of engaging learning activities. Indeed, larger screens and clearer audio are undoubtedly more likely to engage students, but then the convenience of mobility is curtailed. Objections are also raised with regards to touch input versus pen or pencil for learning, since the physical nature of books has a definite advantage in terms of spatial memory. Indeed, there was a study of the use of tablets versus books, and it made clear that the lack of physical space in digital media impeded memory with regards to chronology and the recall of story events. So for EFL, this means that the use of digital materials in lieu of regular textbooks is unlikely to be effective. Ultimately, e-learning idealism ought to be met with caution. Anticipating technology to get better despite current shortcomings is a fallacy. Failed e-learning implementations are numerous and only serve as expensive wastes of time that deter future initiatives, however promising they may initially seem. Hence, before any consideration of e-learning adoption, as proposed in this study, we ought to thoroughly understand the key benefits of call and therefore more. The first of these benefits that necessitate inquiry is learner autonomy. But to understand learner autonomy, we need to talk about motivation. So this is generally purported to be a key predictor of successful second language acquisition. And in an online e-learning environment, it's especially crucial for students. After all, learning remotely, while undoubtedly convenient, also requires discipline. It also brings with it the opportunity for distractions and procrastination, which can lead to poor attainment and missing deadlines. Opponents of technology would quickly attribute the blame to portable devices such as smartphones. But a study by Ishii found a correlation between poor school grades and high mobile phone use in a Japanese junior high school. It was actually shown more to be a result of motivation control than the adverse effects of the phones themselves. So we can surmise that it's the lack of motivation that causes students to overuse such devices rather than themselves being the source of demotivation. In fact, motivation has become a somewhat synonymous component of EFL, but it is questionable how the term can be applied equally among different learning environments, for example, classroom versus online. And that's because motivation is complex, and it covers more than the typical extrinsic or intrinsic strata, usually involving more dynamic factors. It is outside the scope to address these facets, but with regards to e-learning and more, I think the most crucial motivational component is autonomy. And Yen and Lee describe this as an online learning is a highly learner autonomous process in which the student accepts the responsibility to make learning decisions and maintain active control of the learning process. Autonomy is largely an inherent aspect of educational technology, but it shouldn't be confused with self-instruction because despite there being a distance between students, it's not the same, and a teacher transitions from a central role to a more supportive role. So e-learning only makes this simpler as task completion and learning goals can be displayed numerically through automatically generated data or the metrics of the app. And on a similar metric note is engagement time, and a study by Lee and Tsai found that simply measuring online engagement strongly correlated to an increase in self-regulated learning. And this was done by assessing the amount of time spent on the internet, and it positively correlated to their online course success. A second key learning advantage, self-efficacy, may be confused with autonomy, but they are quite distinct. While autonomy relates to the control of learning afforded to a student, self-efficacy relates to their belief in success. Ponton further clarifies that learner autonomy is a construct that exists as a cognitive learner domain, whereas autonomous learning is the resulting cognitive expression. Anxiety with regards to unfamiliar technology is still common despite the prevalence of the technology. Self-efficacy is directly correlated to anxiety, given that steps to reduce anxiety in students positively impact the degree to which an e-learning platform is used. So self-efficacy has, of course, a significant role in language acquisition, and this is key to regulating learning and overall academic achievement. In one meta-study, it was determined that a variation of learning strategies, contextual variables such as the location and experience, and emotional intelligence were the most cited factors influencing EFL self-efficacy. Another study highlighted that the likelihood of a learner using an e-learning platform is generally determined by both their attitude towards the system as well as the perception of its ease of use. This means that self-efficacy is correlated to system accessibility, which is an especially critical consideration for the type of online environments that are the target of this presentation, where help is less readily available. As topics of investigation, self-efficacy and learner autonomy complement each other because they focus on the individual learner. But language learning is also a social phenomenon and thus cannot be ignored. Vygotsky considered the learning process as part of a zone of proximal development or a means of cognitive restructuring through scaffolded learning. Language learning through collaborative tasks increases this scaffolded learning through interactions with others. Swain sees collaboration in EFL as increasing opportunities for constant reflection from utterances, resulting in problem solving and hence knowledge building. When language learners create misunderstandings, they need corrections via clarification requests, which provide them with new input that in turn can generate new output. Online collaboration facilitates the key Web 2.0 and more construct of promoting location-independent communication, allowing for further opportunities to increase L2 output. Online L2 communities can be formed where learners can exchange messages and questions and videos. One type of online platform that might be thought of as real-time or live, such as Zoom, allows for instantaneous collaboration. As previously mentioned, though, these platforms bring technical and logistical challenges, which is why asynchronous platforms are still popular. In fact, the majority of online courses center around text-based discussions. This isn't stated to diminish the effectiveness of such courses, since some studies highlight online text-based language learning is still beneficial, but rather to point out that the medium of instruction has evolved little until the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is why video-based asynchronous platforms have grown in popularity. This is because they allow for both written and spoken means of collaboration while being unconstrained by the immediate connection or hardware difficulties that plague synchronous online classrooms. One study showed that online EFL collaboration promoted a co-construction knowledge that allowed students to scaffold and learn from each other. Giving opinions and solving problems collaboratively gave students more opportunities for giving and receiving feedback, increasing their L2 output. Another study argues that more-based reading activities increased collaborative skills, reduced anxiety in EFL, and enhanced oral reading confidence. Although, having said all this, it must be admitted that asynchronous collaboration does not provide instantaneous feedback akin to speaking, which would facilitate better scaffolding. However, it does allow students to plan their answers carefully and allow more introverted students another avenue for communication. Given that autonomy, self-efficacy, and collaboration are determining factors of a successful e-learning platform, Flipgrid was chosen to be the focus of this presentation since it shows strong signs of supporting these elements. Flipgrid allows teachers to create classes and distribute video questions or assignments which students reply to in pre-recorded video form. It incorporates social media functions such as liking other videos, commenting either by video or text, and displaying the number of views. Videos can be further customized with stickers, photos, and music. It can be accessed from any PC with a webcam, but due to smartphones being the preferred method to access the internet in the author's context of Japan, and since portability and convenience are key advantages of Mall over Call, it would be advisable to use it on these portable devices. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it is unsurprising that much EFL-based research has focused on online platforms, including Flipgrid. Collaboration was shown as a strength of Flipgrid in one study in 2020. Noting that the platform emphasized oral communication, another study found that Flipgrid reduced speaking anxiety and increased motivation in Vietnamese students. Flipgrid has also gathered interest within the context of Japan. One study found that while e-learning platforms were useful in promoting a core pedagogy, Japanese teachers felt they were inadequate in place of in-person classes. Another study found positivity concerning the social media and platform-specific features of Flipgrid, but technical problems and embarrassment were highlighted as negative characteristics. And a final study found that students positively engaged with the platform, and then it could easily be incorporated within an existing learning management system. So overall, there is room for improvement. There are generally positive reactions to the app. Although definitions are not clear, blended learning essentially involves multiple modes of teaching, commonly teaching online and in person at the same time. It produces an optimum mix that addresses the demands of certain contexts. Blended learning in such a way has shown to increase interactions between students and teachers, as well as increasing autonomy and reducing anxiety. So I argue that Flipgrid can be easily integrated into most courses as a homework task in regular intervals. Students, for example, can expand upon ideas covered in class online and continue in person, and this reinforces their learning. The COVID-19 pandemic opened the doors to e-learning platforms that many teachers were not familiar with, myself included. After investigating call on more platforms such as Flipgrid, it became clear that because of an increase in learner autonomy, self-efficacy and collaboration, there's much to be positive about in the space. As with most MAL and call implementations, however, there are technical and logistical problems to be addressed. But I argue that the aforementioned benefits outweigh the challenges, which is why apps such as Flipgrid should be continued to be used or introduced as part of a blended learning EFL course. Well, that's all. Thank you for listening. And on the last slide is a list of references. Thank you.